Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another LLP Live, where we talk to guests that are active in the Ludic language pedagogy scene. This evening, I am joined by Rhianna, aka Willow Flame of Willow Flame Productions, who'll be guiding us through their Ludic journey from England to Korea to Japan and back to England again. Their work developing games, game jams, winning or being nominated for awards. We definitely need to talk about this, and the challenges and opportunities of working with signed languages in game development. We also have Martin Sedegat, who'll be keeping his eye on the chat. So if you have any questions, please use the Zoom chat at any point, and we'll feed your questions to Willow here. So yeah, good evening, everyone.
Hello.
All right, so let's begin. So, good evening, Willow. Thank you for joining us. What time is it in the UK actually? It must be like what, 8 a.m. or something?
11 a.m. at the moment. A
11. It's
bit,
already 11.
yeah.
Wow. Okay. Nearly lunchtime. We'll make sure we finish before lunch for you then, yeah?
Thank you.
So, just in terms of the origin story then. So, could you talk to us very briefly about how did you go from teaching English in South Korea to Japan and then Willow Flame Productions, and maybe even talk a little bit about your bachelor's degree before that as well. Give us a little bit of your bio. Yeah, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I feel like my journey's very much been kind of weaved with game design and also language learning. So I was very interested in games since I was like 11 years old. I wanted to make games.
Hmm.
And then as I got older, I got very interested in language learning. I spent a lot of my free time studying Japanese as a teenager. So I kind of wanted to combine the two eventually. It just kind of seemed like a natural conclusion
Mm.
to bring them both together. And at university, I originally started studying video game programming, but I was spending so much of my time studying Japanese. Like all of my textbooks I had were actually on learning Japanese rather than video game programming. That after a month, I decided to switch to TESOL, the teaching English speakers of other languages, with Japanese
Mm.
instead. But I still very much wanted to include the game making. And I made it very like my teachers all knew that I was very interested in game design. So sometimes in particular modules, like we had a young learner module where we had to design a course based on a children's book or a TV show or something like that. And my lecturer came up to me and was like, if you want to make a video game just for
Mm.
this module, you go ahead, you can do that. You can make a
Mhm.
prototype. So that's what I did. Um, and so I was very lucky that my teachers are very supportive and that I was very interested in games and they allowed me to include it as much as possible. And so then after university, well, actually during university, I lived in Japan for a year as part of my degree. And then after university, I worked in in an education and publishing company for a little bit. So it's a company based in Spain, but I was in the UK and I helped them with gamifying their textbook. So we had like time traveling teenagers in the story and kind of ways that we could make the textbook more fun and engaging.
Mhm.
Then after that, I lived in South Korea for a year. And I was very lucky again at my job that I had the freedom to design any kind of course that I wanted. So I made ones which helped my learners learn English through making video games.
Mm.
And now returning back to the UK, because it has been my long-term goal of making language learning games, I kind of moved to Korea, partially because the game I was making at the time was about a young girl moving to a country where she doesn't speak the language. I thought, well, I've lived in Japan before, but I was studying Japanese for years beforehand. So I kind of
Mm.
wanted to experience living in a country without knowing the language, just to see what
Mm.
kind of like. So I'm that's why I picked to move to Korea. So I try to study as little as possible before going, just so I can like really experience what it's like when you're suddenly, for whatever reason, maybe your parents move, like kind of experience what it is like to be in a country where you don't know the language.
Right.
And then yeah, I've come back to the UK. I've formed my own studio, and then I work part time at MindJam.
Okay, right. So that's a lot. That's a lot of stuff. So just to confirm then,
Yeah,
you got a BA or a BSc? No, BA, isn't it? Yeah, you got a bachelor's
yeah, yeah,
degree
yeah. Hmm.
in TESOL, teaching English
Yes,
as teaching English to speakers of other languages, right? Okay.
yeah,
Um,
exactly, yeah.
yeah. And then did you come over to Japan on like the JET program or something or
So I originally was meant to, but then the pandemic hit, unfortunately, so I
ah,
wasn't able to. But so my university, if you were studying a language, you could spend a year abroad in that country as long as your grades
okay.
were high enough. So
Uh-huh.
I was lucky enough then to go to Japan.
So it's like a foreign exchange then in a way.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Okay. And what university did you study at in the UK?
So the University of Central Lancashire.
Central Lancashire. Okay, we know that one. Yeah, that one's big on the old. ESL, EFL,
Mhm.
what would you call it? Like radar. Yeah, I know of that one.
Yeah, yeah, no,
Um,
yeah, it's a great university for that.
and which university did you come to in Japan?
Kanda Gaigo Daigaku,
Ah,
which is in
Kanda
Chiba
Gaigo.
Prefecture.
Okay, okay, know that one. Do you remember any of the staff there? Did you see any of the?
Oh, that is
It's okay, it's
a great
okay.
question. I don't think, to be honest, I don't think any of them are actually still there from what I've seen. I know
Okay,
one of them is, I think now moved to Africa for a bit because she's very interested in like African like languages.
okay.
So I don't think any of the people back when I was there are still
I just mean
around.
I know a lot of the teachers there. That's all. That's the
Oh,
only thing.
okay.
It's okay. So okay. So you did that. Came to study in Canada for a year.
hmm
Started making games. Moved to Korea to experience
hmm
that kind of being out of your comfort zone with the
hmm
language, and then went back to UK. And this MindJam keeps coming up. This name
hmm
MindJam. Tell me about this. I'm not
hmm
100% sure I know what it is, so that'd be cool to
Yeah.
hear about. Yeah.
So MindJam is a company where it's mostly designed for young people with special educational needs, but they don't have to be have special educational needs to take part. And it's for them to have one-to-one mentorship, and it could be either playing games or it could be making games or music or whatever they're interested in. But it's
Hmm.
all every single session is mentee led. So it's one-to-one sessions normally, or sometimes a very small group session.
Hmm.
And everything is just mentally led on what they want to focus on.
What's
And
Menti
it's
led?
trying, yes. So it's so whatever they want to do. So say if they want to play a
What
certain
does that
game.
mean though? Sorry, what does Menti mean? Sorry.
Oh, so it's so I'm like a mentor, and then it's all every single individual like
Oh, okay,
um
okay, okay.
yeah
Menti.
yeah
I was thinking it
yeah
was
yeah
like something like
no worries.
MENTI or okay.
Yeah, no worries.
Gotcha.
But yeah,
My
so
bad.
it's all based on exactly what they want to learn, what they want to focus on. And it also then has kind of the kind of undertones of trying to help them build their confidence. So
Hmm.
this would be kind of what the parents maybe want, either them building like confidence or social skills, and sometimes also then like the technical skills of game design. But it's always focused on what the individual wants to do. So I can't force them. I can't go in and have a lesson plan all made and be like,
Hmm.
oh, today we're going to be studying all of this. It's very much whatever they want to do, which can sometimes definitely throw them in the deep end if they want to learn how to program something I don't know how to do. And
Hmm.
so sometimes it's very much we have to learn together, which can be good as well because it kind of shows that, for instance, no matter how long you've been programming something, you're not, or any kind of job, you're not necessarily going to know how to do something 100%. Which can sometimes help with some of my mentees that are very focused on like perfectionism. It
Hmm.
helps kind of show them that you don't, it's fine to not be perfect and not know how to do things.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, yeah, and so yeah,
So
that's kind of what MindJam focuses on.
the MindJam is that a national program in the UK or is that a private company or what?
So it's yeah, it's a private company, and they have it started off in the UK, but there's now mentors in America and I think Australia, and there are some mentees from all around Europe and some other countries as well. So like
Okay.
anybody can sign up to take part in it.
So and it's specifically for kind of extracurricular education for students you said with learning disabilities, is that correct?
Yeah, kind of not necessarily like learning
Okay,
disabilities, but yeah,
sorry.
it can be that type of that thing. Like I mean, some of the cases it can be like bullying, for instance.
Oh,
And
okay,
quite a lot
okay.
of the mentees have don't go to school. So there are some of them do go to school, but quite a lot have actually dropped out of education almost completely. And so this is kind of an extra provision,
Hmm.
sometimes like as a stepping stone to get them back into
Right, right,
education.
right. That makes
So
sense.
kind of getting them familiar with like talking to adults maybe again, or
Hmm.
starting to build up a social network. And the goal is to eventually try and get them back into some kind of form of education, whether
Right,
it's
right.
more online lessons or going actually back into school. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, so it's but anybody can sign up. So I do have some mentees who are in full-time education, and also
Gotcha.
have quite a lot who don't go to school at all.
Hmm. Okay. So the Mind Jam is this extracurricular um institution of sorts where
hmm
you're matched with certain students and they come to you wanting to do certain things and
hmm
you fulfill their needs as best you can.
Yeah.
And generally the people that come to you, Willow, are the students that want to do something with games and game design. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, normally,
Hmm.
yeah, quite a lot of my mentees are definitely interested in game design. I do
Hmm.
have some who are just interested in playing games as well, and that's totally fine. Sometimes,
Okay.
we'll just spend like sessions playing through games, and we might sometimes talk about game design there. Like they might tell me
Mm.
about features that they'd rather the game have, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
So there are ways you can kind of link it back to game design, even if they aren't actively making a game at the time.
And I saw something around this MindJam and your connection with it. Something to do with an award or something. I've seen something about an award or a nomination or
Oh
something
yeah,
at least. Can you tell me about that? Because I need to get this
yeah,
straight in
yeah,
my
sure.
head. Yeah.
No worries. So when I was 16 years old, I was the first female winner of the BAFTA Young Game Designers competition.
The BAFTA
Um,
Young Game Designers Competition. Wow,
yes,
that's pretty
yes, so,
prestigious.
yes. Yeah. So the BAFTA basically wants to get more young people into the game industry. It's a yearly event, and it's still going now.
Uh-huh.
And I how I met MindJam was just before I moved to South Korea. Actually, I was
Mm.
invited to do a talk as one of the past winners. So I was at
Mm-hmm.
the current kind of award weekend, talking to the new finalists and the new winners. And the CEO of MindJam, Dan, was also there. And because we're both very much into like education and games, we obviously
Mm-hmm.
started chatting,
Mm.
after the event. And then when I came back to the UK very recently, I saw that he posted looking for more people to become game design mentors. So I thought, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I already know about MindJam, and I agree with kind of
Mm.
their like how they approach learning and
Mm.
how things. And so I thought, why not apply? And I managed to get the job, and so that's why I work part time now at MindJam.
Excellent. Excellent. So the award that you won wasn't specifically connected to MindJam, which opens up the question
Mhm.
then. Um, Tell us about the BAFTA Young, what was it, Young Game Designer of the Year award. Tell us about
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I entered that competition when I was 16 years old. So the game I entered back then was that you play as a tomato in a bowl of fruit salad, and your goal is to get to the spoon the fastest. And then after winning that, so I had quite like it was quite it was a crazy experience, to be honest. I went from just making games in my bedroom to suddenly I was in magazines, I was
Hmm.
in newspapers, I was on the radio. So it went from 0 to 100 very, very quickly.
Hmm.
Um, and but like from that experience, like often had quite a lot of people coming up to me, and they'll say things like, oh, games are just shooting, or you're
Hmm.
a girl, you shouldn't be making
Ooh,
games. That's a boy thing. I had that a lot, even in magazine interviews, for instance, as well back then.
that's wild.
Um, but that kind of made me realize that I wanted to make games that would have an impact, and that could,
Mm,
prove to people that games are powerful. They aren't all just shooting. And even though those games can have an educational focus to it, it can help you with hand-eye coordination. So I
for
mean,
sure.
all games can be learning experiences. But even since back then, I was very interested in learning Japanese, which then kind of quite easily kind of made me go like, you know what, I want to make games that can help people learn languages. Languages are
Mm,
really important. The more language you speak, the more people you can interact with.
mm.
And I feel like the more nicer society can be as people speak more languages and relate to new cultures and meet new people and kind of just have a more open mind to the world.
Yeah, totally. Totally. I agree. So from there, then you've been developing, that leads us nicely into the topic of your own current adventures with game design and language learning. As somebody that's obviously studied a lot of Japanese, and you perhaps know a bit of the landscape when it comes to Japanese games. I mean, I think one of the hot languages is Japanese. If you see a game,
Hmm.
if there's a language learning game, it's generally like, oh, it's there to teach Japanese. A lot of them,
Hmm.
they focus, they almost fetishize Japanese as the language to be learned through games. You've
Hmm.
perhaps heard of like the Slime Forest game and stuff like that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
so what's your own take then? I think that's the question I'm coming to here. What is your take? And yeah, what have you been doing with your own language games?
Hmm. But yeah, I definitely agree. Quite a lot of language learning games focus on Japanese. I guess maybe that might be also somewhat to do with how Japan's very big on anime, so it kind of
Hmm.
and also has a massive game industry itself.
Mm.
So it's kind of ties in quite well with that. A lot of people who consume that media also want to end up learning the language, and then they go quite well together, pairing them. But also, obviously, it works very well with any language.
Yeah.
Adding in gamification or just making games for it. Um, but yeah, Japanese is definitely a very popular language. Even actually, with my own mentees at MindJam, a lot of my mentees are demand avoidant, so that you can't really tell them to do something, they won't do it. but they all willingly will go on Duolingo and learn Japanese. I have so many of them that are just learning Japanese for fun. So Japanese is
Hmm.
definitely a language that appeals to so many people to learn.
Yeah.
Um, and then with my own games, obviously I also include Japanese in it too, just because I have experience learning Japanese, so it makes it a bit easier from a language learner to put in a language that I already have some experience in.
Mm.
And then I also include sign languages in my games
Yeah,
because they're
that's right. Yeah.
very underrepresented, underrepresented in all games. You can't
True.
really play any games apart from a very small amount that have sign languages,
Mm.
which then makes it just difficult for the deaf community who do prefer to play in sign languages. Um, for instance, subtitles isn't always enough because, for instance, British English and written and spoken language have a completely different grammar. BSL is actually closer to Japanese grammar than it is to
Hmm.
English grammar, which then
Mm.
means that if somebody wants to then go at home at the end of the day and play a game, they're actually having to almost read in their non-native language all the time without really choosing to because they have to, it's a completely different grammar system.
Mm.
So it can be much easier, and not all deaf people prefer it, but quite a lot from the deaf community do prefer having sign language just because, it's their native language.
Right, right, right.
So
It, so
I
it's
try
their
and include
native.
yeah.
Sorry. Go on.
I don't know, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's an interesting, that's something that I hadn't really considered before. The fact that um, hearing impaired or a deaf person in the UK, their the native language is the sign language, and
Mhm.
the reading is kind of a second. Is that what you're saying there?
Yes. Yeah, because
Interesting.
it doesn't match up. It's for
Mm.
instance, um if they were to write English in the same structure as BSL, the word order and everything would be completely
Right.
different.
Okay.
So they're having to kind of like almost learn. It's almost like learning a foreign language just because it's so
Right.
different. That they have it can lead to some issues, and there's been lots of studies that show that often literacy rates among the deaf community is often low, and can often be kind of lower all around the level of someone who is dyslexic, just because of those difficulties in that it being so different. And this is common in almost, I think, pretty much every sign language around the world. It's
Mm-mm.
different to the spoken language that it's often linked to. Um, and so then that can lead to issues like reading and writing. Um, and then also can lead to issues of learning foreign languages too, because learning a foreign language, the resources are going to be in the written language of the country that they're in. It's not going to be provided in sign language. And there's even been
Mm.
studies back in like 2017 by Contra who found that there is a lack of educational resources for deaf individuals who want to learn a foreign language, which
Mm-hmm.
then really impacts their ability to do so. I mean, it doesn't stop people. There's so many deaf people that I know who do know multiple sign languages, are able to read and write in multiple languages too, but it's significantly harder for them to get the resources that they need. So they have to really, really work for it, which means it's only really the most motivated people who are able to do so. Whereas I want to kind of include it in my game so that people of all motivation types have the opportunity to learn and kind of immerse themselves in another language through gameplay.
Yeah, okay. That's yeah, it's totally noble. I have two questions here. I forgot the second one
Hmm.
though. The first one was then how did you go from looking at foreign languages, like written, spoken foreign languages,
Hmm.
as the topic of game design, to then not pivot, but at least consider the signed languages? How did that happenstance come about?
Hmm. I think that also is kind of like gradually happened over time. So I'm quite interested in languages in general.
Hmm.
I love like kind of learning new facts about languages. And when I was living in Japan and also after I left Japan, I started just being interested in Japanese sign language. So I'd
Right.
actually spend quite a lot of time for like my listening practice would be watching videos of someone explaining some grammar or some sign language in Japanese. And I watched that for quite a long time.
Mm.
And then when I moved to South Korea again, I was like, oh, I was quite interested in learning some Korean Sign Language.
Mm.
But then unlike Japanese, I didn't have the Korean spoken or written ability. So I
Hmm.
couldn't watch videos that were designed for someone to learn Korean because almost all of them were in Korean.
Yeah, yeah.
Which then led to the point that's like, oh, I can actually easily learn this language. And then looking online, there were very few resources that had English in it.
Mm.
Um, which then has kind of led me to kind of making like my current game is actually is the background of that. Here is one that allows people to freely pick and choose what languages, that you can switch between the languages seamlessly. So if, for instance, you're an English speaker and you wanted to learn Korean Sign Language, you could learn it that way. You can use English as support to learning it, or whatever other language you want, and you can switch halfway through if you know multiple languages. And maybe you don't quite understand it in one language, you can then switch to the explanation in another language.
Hmm.
Just give people that scaffolding and the freedom to choose how they want to learn.
Gotcha. Um, so tell us about that game then. Tell us a bit more about this one. What are the
Yeah.
languages in it, and what are the learning outcomes that you expect? Yeah, tell
Mhm.
us about it.
Okay. So this game is called Supernova Language Universe. So it's still in development at the moment. And so over here you have this big sun character, and the players play as this you can't really see him very well, but it's like a little ray of sunshine
Hmm.
piloting this rocket. And the sun will be demanding different items, and you basically play as a space delivery boy who has
Hmm.
to pick up all this clutter that is in the universe and deliver it to the sun. And you can then, while playing, you have the option to just switch languages. You can, before you start playing, pick all the languages you want to be able to have access to, and then you can switch between them. So at the moment, I'm like focusing on English, French, Italian, German, Spanish, Japanese, with the equivalent sign languages, but
Wow, okay.
it's it's still early stages, and like funding constraints as well is meaning
Right.
that, look, I'm not able
S-
to go as fast as I would like with adding
That's
in
okay.
all
Yeah.
languages.
So in essence, then it's kind of a vocabulary learning
Hmm.
tool,
Yes.
like an
Yeah, yeah.
introduction to all of these different languages,
Hmm.
with paired
Yes.
languages that you can choose yourself, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah, I'm
Right,
hoping
gotcha.
to like in the future expand it into like sentences and stuff like that as well. But I thought if I start simple with the vocab at the very least,
Yeah, yeah,
it gives
sure.
people the resource to learn multiple languages.
Hmm.
And it um and as I've been kind of looking into, sign language inclusive games or like things for learning sign languages, I've actually noticed that there's that most sign language learning like apps out there are designed for hearing learners.
Hmm.
So if people again the issue of if a deaf person wants to learn another language, they can't really learn it in their native sign language if they want to. So that's why like this game allows you to freely switch, so you can choose to see it in British Sign Language if you want, but you can also turn it off. So if people don't want to have sign languages on their screen, they can turn it off. If you don't want to see text on the screen, you can turn it off. If you don't want audio, you can turn it off. It's very flexible on what you see and what you can't see. And also like includes the International Phonetic Alphabet and all sorts of different things, so people can really pick and choose
Hmm.
exactly how they want to learn.
Hmm.
Um, uh, but yeah, so that's what I've
So
been
this
working on.
is in development then you said, yeah?
Yes, yeah, it's in development at the moment. I'm hoping to try and release at least an early access alpha before the Deaf Olympics in Tokyo this November.
Hmm.
Um, but we'll have to wait and see. But that is my goal at the moment, to release it for then.
Fingers crossed on that one. Yeah.
Thank you.
So related to this, then I think one area of education in terms of language learning and game design that you have worked in here as well is the idea of a game jam around a particular
Hmm.
topic, the Signful Game
Hmm.
Jam and the Not My Lang Jam. I think these
Hmm.
are, what can I say? Sorry. It's not intuitively obvious that a game jam and designing a game using language is a language learning activity. What we've looked at them up until this point, we've talked about your own game, which is a game to pick up certain vocabulary items, right? So it's the game
Hmm.
being the kind of source material for learning, right? And the
Hmm.
opposite for that
Yeah.
here is what you've done, where you've had people or students, I don't know we'll talk about who it is in a moment, but the act of developing a game itself as the language learning
Hmm.
experience and tool, the tool towards learning. Sorry, I'm a bit loopy today because I've had
Yeah.
some cold medicine, but
No.
yeah,
No worries.
you get what I'm saying? Like the actual
Yeah.
game
Yeah.
jam itself. Tell us a bit about
Hmm.
your experience doing the game jams then and how they've been language learning
Hmm.
experiences. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess this kind of also stems from my experience as being a language teacher. So when I was in South Korea, I'd
Okay.
often teach my students how to make their own video games in English, and then they'd make their own example game, whether it's in like Twine, whether it's or narrative based, or some other
Mm.
simple and quick game making tool, like Bitsy, for instance, where you don't really need to know any
Right,
programming.
Bitsy. Haven't touched
Yeah,
Bitsy in a
Bitsy is
while. Yeah.
Yeah, if that's a great one for language education. I used to have for lesson one, and what I'd used to do with I'd give them a sheet, and it would have like lots of different like characters on it, and I'll get them to interview all their classmates with a very simple question like, "What's your favorite fruit?" And they'd write down the person's name, like say whoever they spoke to, and then say whatever the answer is, and then later on I'll tell them to put every single person that they met today in the class in a game in Bitsy using the dialogue that they said, and it's almost in a way gives very much game-like dialogue because when you talk to an NPC in a game, they will
Yeah.
just tell you something random like what their favorite fruit is.
True.
Um, and so that all the kids that I worked with and teenagers that I worked with kind of got to turn themselves and their classmates into game characters, which often they quite enjoyed doing that. And they were learning English skills by making a game. And kind of after, but I quite enjoy taking part in game jams. I take part in game jams quite often. I tried looking around for one for language learning. Like I wanted to try and improve my Japanese a bit more. I wanted to make some games in Japanese. And I think there have maybe been some around in the past, but there wasn't any currently happening at the time. So after a while, I was like, you know what? I've taken part in loads of game jams. Why not try hosting one? Um, and like one of my goals is to eventually try and like we'll get the old lesson plans that I used in the past and make it so that other teachers like make it freely available for other teachers to use and adapt to whatever languages they're teaching their students so that it can then also be used in language classrooms. But it also is quite effective for game devs as well in the games industry. Like I know quite a lot of game devs who are learning other languages, whether they live in Japan or they live in South Korea or just any other country. It's kind of a good experience and that you kind of get to improve your game dev skills at the same time as language learning. So it's like two birds in one stone. Everyone has a limited amount of time in their day, but with a game jam like this, you can kind of do both skills at once. And
Hmm.
then the Signful Game Jam came about is that I really want to try and help encourage other game devs to include sign languages in their games.
Hmm.
Um, and after a while, I've been trying to get funding for quite a while to make my sign language inclusive games. And was hoping that kind of by like showing by example, I might be able to help encourage people. But then I realized, there's actually why not just do the same thing I had done before and make another game jam. And it turns out there's actually quite a lot of game devs I've met who have been interested in sign languages. So I've had quite a few who live in France who've told me they've actually tried learning French sign language on off for a few years. But seeing this game jam kind of encouraged them to start learning it again. And also made people realize, also again, some people from France have told me they've never actually seen a French developer include French sign language, which then just makes people realize that, oh, actually, sign language is being very excluded from games and educational
Hmm.
materials. And then hopefully just by that small change of more people adding it to the games and realizing that it's not actually that difficult.
Hmm.
It isn't super difficult to add sign language to the games. My hope is that in the future, particularly AAA studios will start just including sign languages. I mean, if they can hire voice actresses and or actors and spend millions of pounds and dollars on that, then a fraction of that cost can be used to hire a sign language interpreter. And one of the great things about games as well is that because the scripts are often already written anyway,
Hmm.
you can actually hire native signers. So do sign language translation instead. So a native signer can read the script and then we'll convert it back into their native sign language.
Hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah. I guess the one of the objectives or one of the results or the positive results of hosting this Signful Game Jam at them is Jam then is the awareness raising that you've done around this particular
Hmm.
issue. Got a couple of questions from the chat here. Petra was
Oh
asking
yeah.
about how old are the students that were engaged? I think the game jam, was it a public game jam or was it to your students or and how old
Uh,
were they if it
so the
was? Yeah.
so the original ones were done in South Korea. So like it wasn't quite really a game jam then. It was just teaching them how to make games.
Like as part of
And they
classroom instruction?
yeah, part of classroom. So the youngest I've done it with was 7.
Seven
And
years
then
old.
the oldest were about 14.
Okay.
So it's a big wide range of ages it can be used with, and you can just kind of tweak the language that they need to know um based on their level and their ability.
That would relate to then Martin's question here, which is also in the chat here, which is what would be some of the apps and software that you recommend for people who are interested in making their own games but don't have a deep background in programming slash design?
Okay, definitely Bitsy. That is like a great one for making something because you can use different like it gives you everything. You have a little sprite making tool. which is all pixel based. You don't have to be a great artist. It can bind you in a way which is good for kind of starting out. You also don't really need to know any programming at all. If you want to make it a bit more advanced, then you can go into doing some programming, but it's still very, very slight. You don't need to know lots. It also has a little bit of music, like tweaking in it as well. So it kind of gives you a taste of all different aspects of game design without having to go very deep and use multiple different softwares.
Hmm.
And it's also all browser based as well.
Yeah, browser
So
based,
you
I was
don't have
going to
to
say.
download, yeah, you don't have to download anything, which, for instance, some teachers, maybe they may not be able to download software on their schools, it may not be allowed to. So that's why Bitsy is just great because you can do it in your browser. And then another good one is Twine.
Twine,
This one
yeah.
I'd recommend probably more for slightly older students just because it is more writing. You're going to have to be doing a lot more writing. And it makes like kind of visual novels type games. And again, that is very easy. All you need is to connect the different branches in your story is you need two square brackets on both sides of a sentence, and that will just turn it into a branch. And that's the only thing kind of programmy-ish. It's not, I don't know if it necessarily
Hmm.
counts, but that's kind of all you really need to do to be able to make all these branches. You can make massive games in that, and it can go in a lot of detail. And then I think those ones will probably be the main ones for starting out, and then there are other like really good ones like Scratch as well. Actually, Scratch would be another one that I think would be quite useful, but you do need to know
Yep,
a bit more kind of programming logic.
true.
But there's so many like short tutorials out there, like 5 minute long tutorials on how to make something that if you are interested in more of that side of things, then Scratch can be really great to use. And then from there it kind of starts getting more advanced. And you have to you have to know a lot more programming concepts and maybe even dabble in a bit more coding. So I think those ones are like the best ones to start with.
Yeah, a good one about Scratch is the fact that you can find little Scratch games and look inside them to see how they've
Hmm.
been created and replicate it
Yeah, yeah,
yourself. Yeah.
yeah. And it has a cool remix function as well. So you can kind of take a game and then make tweaks to it and then you can re-upload it as a remix
Hmm.
too.
Martin has no, yeah, Martin has got another question here. He said, "I really like your colorful crayon slash pastel-like artwork that you're using in the games. Is there a particular reason that you use this style as opposed to pixel art or 3D objects?"
So I originally actually developed the style during a game jam.
Hmm.
So I needed to draw things very quickly.
Mm.
And it just turns out that this kind of crayon style I can do very, very quick. So I used to take part quite often in a 1 hour game jam. So I had only 1 hour to do the programming, the gameplay, or the art and everything. And so in about like maybe 10, 15 minutes, I could have all the art I needed in the game made. And
Mm.
it just works quite well with like the crayon art style. It can kind of give it not necessarily like I guess somewhat like a storybook childlike feel to it, but it
Mm-hmm.
kind of works well together with the simple style and just also works very well for time constraints. And I just kind of fell in love with the style after doing it for a while, so then it just became my main style. And
How are you
uh,
drawing it?
as, so I often I mostly use Fire Alpaca, which is a free software.
What was that, sorry?
Um, Fire Alpaca,
File
Fire Alpaca.
Fire Alpaca? That's what I heard.
So Fire but yeah, it's a completely free
Uh-huh.
software um that I use, but there's so many different ones out there that
Right.
you can use. I sometimes
Share
use
it in the chat.
Procreate.
Share it in the chat.
Yeah, I will do one
It's
second.
a very Yoshi's Island feel to it. Yeah, I get that vibe too. Yeah, that's a good point. Fire
Um
alpaca. Okay, that's what you said.
yeah, yes. Yeah, no,
That's all
it's
good.
a very odd name for what it
Yeah,
is. Like it has nothing
fire
to do at all with
alpaca.
drawing. Um
Okay.
but yeah, it's I if you want something free, I quite recommend it. I find it's quite useful for doing animations as well. I really like the onion skin mode that it has in it. It's very easy to make. You don't need to know how to make animations at all to use it. So it's a
Mm,
very like user-friendly software. And
okay.
then I also sometimes use Procreate, but it
Procreate on
the
the iPad, is
yeah
that?
yeah on the iPad.
Right.
But normally then that kind of ends up going slightly down to a different art style. But
Okay.
yeah, all the crayon stuff is pretty much almost always made in Fire Alpaca.
I want to focus a little bit on the not my lang jam because I think this one
Hmm.
is a little bit different to the Signful Game Jam here,
Hmm.
whereas
Hmm.
the core concept I'm led to believe is that you're developing a game in a language that's your second language, right? So the
Hmm.
dialogue and the
Hmm.
narrative choices, everything, all the menus. it's in a
Mhm.
language that you're learning. Is that the vibe? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, no, that's exactly right. And or it can also be as well a language that you've made. So Konglangs
Oh,
are
a
accepted.
conlang. Okay.
Yeah. And actually, last year we did have someone enter a Konglang for a game that they're making just in general. And they
Mm,
used it to kind of experiment more of the language that they're making. So it's very flexible. So it has to be in a language that you're just not a native speaker in. So it could be like, I don't know, your fifth language you're learning, for instance, or just any language that even if it's at the start of the game jam, like, day one, you're like, you know what, I want to learn Italian. You never learned it before. You can, enter it. You don't have to be perfect. Like one thing in the game is kind of this game jam is to kind of focus on not being perfect. I feel like a lot
mm,
of language learners kind of get very kind of stuck in that thing that you have to be perfect at language. Whereas
mm,
even native speakers, I'm an English speaker, but I'm not perfect at English
mm,
24/7. I
mm,
make mistakes. I
mm,
say wrong words. I sometimes use bad grammar. It's just to kind of get out of that kind of perfectionist mindset. And I think game jams are perfect for that. Because you have that time constraint. Sometimes you just have to, lose features in a game. Maybe there's some bugs you can't fix. So it kind of just also leads quite well to the language learning as well. Just try your best. It may not be perfect, but as long as people understand or,
yeah.
kind of get the gist of what's going on, that is the main thing. Um,
It's really, yeah, a really clever idea. I think both of your game jam ideas are, yeah, very unique and important for
Thank
different
you.
reasons, right? The first one being to bring awareness to the lack of sign language in games, and the second one being
Mhm,
to have language learners do something with the language that's it's a product that they're producing in their second language that they can feel proud of at the end of
mhm,
the day. So yeah, both
mhm.
very very cool initiatives. I like them a lot.
Thank you.
Cool.
And my hope is in the future to try and kind of get these more into schools as well. Um,
Mm,
just because I feel like it would just work so well with kind of language-based curriculums that
mm.
it'd be great to kind of get even more people, not necessarily game designers or people who are already making games, kind of taking part.
So may I jump onto this question then about the communities around the jams and maybe a Discord community or something.
Mhm,
So do you see a community being developed around these things? And
mhm,
what role do, if so, what role does that community play in your own design process?
mhm. Yeah, no, so there's definitely a small community starting to be built up from it. Particularly there's more currently around the Not My Lang Jam, just because I mean that started last year as well, so it's been going on for a bit longer. And in that community as well, it's not just focused on the game jam, but it's just focused on game developers or people interested in the games who are learning a foreign language.
Mm,
So I mean it's not really possible to very easily moderate this kind of
right.
channel, this kind of Discord because every single channel is in a different language or is encouraged to be in a different language.
Okay.
So just people have to just try and be nice and respectful. I will from time to time if it is a language I'm not learning, chuck it into Google Translate just so I can like have a gist of what's being said. But so far, everyone's all been really lovely. Um,
Hmm.
and people, just practicing the language that they want to learn. And then also sometimes you have native speakers of that language will also jump into those servers from time to time and might, help out, or they just might just take part in the discussions as well.
Mm,
And it's really great to see, especially if there's some people who are maybe more beginners at learning a language, then kind of taking part. And like one way that I mean, I've been this past month, I haven't done it so often, so I need to get back into doing it a bit more next month. But is adding in topics and optional topics that people can talk about in each of the different servers that are either maybe language learning based or video game based. And I'd often provide a simple structure that they can use. So even if you are a beginner, I'll be like, look up this kind of sentence structure in the language you're learning, and then you can use that to write your sentence. Whereas
mm,
if you know more language, you can write a whole paragraph about it. But it could
mm,
be like, what's your favorite game and why? You maybe might just focus on like my favorite game is, and
mm.
you may, if you're able to, add a because, but if not, just you can just say my favorite game is this, and then in the future, maybe in a few months' time, you might then be able to go on and start saying longer things.
All right, so
Um,
it's the community then is a community of language learners and
mhm,
interested in game design at the same time, and you're kind of promoting them to do both things at once. So
yeah,
yeah, sounds like a hard task, but yeah,
yeah,
interesting.
but it's been going really well so far. I mean, there's some people, for instance, in the Discord community as well, who maybe haven't yet really started practicing another language, but they're just focused mostly on their native language, which is
Mm,
fine as well because they kind of get encouragement for other people and they can kind of see. I definitely know some people are nervous about being wrong and not getting the language perfect. But
Sure.
I think over time you kind of see that, oh, it's totally fine. It doesn't matter if you make a couple mistakes. Um, and then also I do have a community for the Signful Games Jam as well. That one's still a lot smaller because I quite a lot of people are in the other Discord too. So there's some of the people over there will be kind of asking questions about Signful Game Jam in the just the general language learning game dev channel.
Mm.
But I have recently been getting a few more people coming into the channel who are interested in forming teams. So I know there's a couple of artists who've kind of joined in who want to try and like see if they can find a team of people to make a sign language based game. Or just people who have just found about the jam randomly on itch. So it's not people that are in my
Mm-hmm.
network or wider network. It's people who just kind of like stumbled upon it and was like, oh, I've been learning sign language for this amount of time. I'd like to take part, or I'd like to take part in a few years' time. I've had some people tell me they're still quite new to game development, so they don't feel quite ready yet.
Mm.
But they want to join just so that they can kind of have that reminder to maybe come back next year and try out then.
Mm. Great, yeah. Well, hopefully it's on the up and up.
Yeah, yeah, hopefully.
So just this is a kind of off-topic question in a way, but
Mhm.
for you, what makes a language learning friendly game? Like, what is a
Mhm.
language learning friendly game?
Well, I guess the start off with would be that it's in the language you want to learn.
Okay.
So I think any game out there, as long as it's got a translation into the language you want to learn, then it
Mm-hmm.
can be a language learning game. And that
For sure.
obviously means it
Yeah.
has to be a game that has language in it. Like it can't just be, for instance, like a platformer that doesn't really have any language.
Mm.
There are ways to make it more language focused, but that would probably be more in a classroom setting where
Yeah,
you
for
maybe
sure.
have like
Yeah.
a teacher telling you to press certain buttons or something like that.
Mm-mm-mm.
But yeah, I think yeah, step one is just having access to the language you want to learn so that you have the option to play it in that language if you want
Yeah.
to. For instance, I know loads of people played Animal Crossing in the language that they're learning. And
Yeah.
cozy games in particular are very good just because you can go at your own pace. Quite often, like cozy games are also quite often like farming based games, and they often,
Mm.
I don't know, you grow a carrot, you pick up a carrot, it tells you, I've got 10 carrots. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that the language can be quite useful in that you have that context. I'm
Yeah.
doing this thing, I have this thing. So that could be really great for that. And yeah, just because it's quite slow. But I feel like if anyone's like really determined, any game can be turned into a language learning game if you choose to view it in the language that you're learning and you kind of stick at it.
Yeah.
And then it will just kind of vary on your own like ability. But yeah, the cozy games in particular, they are good because you can go at your own pace. And if you do for whatever like reason want to pick up a dictionary and look up a word if you don't know it, if you want to pick up from context, you can. Whereas like a more fast-paced shooting game, you don't really have that time to stop and pause. But it
Yeah.
can be also good for like quick thinking. Like you have to just kind of figure out what's being said to you as fast as possible and just run with it.
Mm-mm.
So I feel like kind of any genre can potentially become a language learning game. It
Yep,
just
I
depends on
agree.
how you use it.
Yeah, yeah, totally. That's it. Yeah, I totally agree. For sure. So my final question, before I hand over
Mhm.
to the audience here, but the future then. It sounds like you've got a lot of things planned. I guess there's going to be some more not my lang jams, some more Signful game
Mhm.
jams. But yeah, what's in the future for Willow Flame?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot more game jams. Hoping for some game releases soon as well. That'll be really good. And just I'm hoping for in the future just either like helping other devs kind of add sign language in the game. Like I'm hoping to start posting up tutorials soon.
Mm,
'Cause at the moment there aren't like any tutorials out there for learning sign language or putting sign language into games. More specifically. So just kind of what I've learned like. Quite often the game making tools I use don't necessarily aren't really designed for it. So Game Maker, for instance, the video player got more designed for cutscenes,
mm,
but I forced it into being able to be used for sign language and that you use it every single moment in the game, whereas it just really wants to be used only occasionally, and the debug thing at the bottom will be screaming at you and not happy, but the game works and the players can use it and they don't notice anything. So
yeah.
just kind of adding more tutorials just to make it more easier and accessible, so that people who do think, oh, I'd like to add this thing, actually kind of have some more structure and support to make it just a little bit easier. And I'm hoping like in the future that, as I feel like all games I think can be potentially language learning games. But with just very little tweaks, games can also add in more scaffolding. So like one of the things that I do in my games is allow bilingual mode. So the player can choose to see two languages at once or more if they want to.
Mm.
um, just so that, and you can then turn it on and off as you need. So rather than, if you do feel like you have to go get a dictionary, you don't have to physically stop the game, go and get a dictionary, look it up. You can just press a button, get that immediate feedback, so then you can just check if you understand something, and then you can just keep playing without really breaking that immersion. And so many
Mm.
games that, they can very easily just add that kind of thing if they already have the text,
Yeah.
just a couple lines of code and you can add in two different languages appearing on screen,
Mm.
which can then I think would help a lot more of language learning. Um,
Mm.
Obviously there can be some downsides and that people then might use it as more too much of a crutch and then may just end up
Mm.
just reading the native language the whole time. But just having more options for people, I
Mm.
think would, greatly benefit the language learning community as a whole.
Excellent. And another trip to Japan, yeah?
Yes, hopefully, yes. Um, Definitely, I think by November as well, even if it's not a permanent move, I definitely will be out there for the Deaf Olympics.
Excellent.
Um,
We have to send us a message when you come over. We can hang out or something.
oh yeah, that'd be really cool. Yeah, I definitely will do.
I won't be able to teach you any Japanese sign language, but I'll be able to, yeah, hang out, that's for sure.
Nice.
All right, well, thanks so much, Willow, taking up a lot of your time here. We've got about 10 minutes before the hour. I know we've got a few people in the audience. Any further questions or things that I might have missed? Yeah, Martin, go for it.
Yeah, I know in the survey when people registered for this, there was a space for people to put questions in there, and there was one question in particular that asked, "How, if so, do you use? Is there any role for AI in the kind of games and the programming you're
Wow.
doing? And if not, do you think there could be for yeah? Because a lot of people use AI." Chat GPT
Mhm.
and stuff with languages. Do you think there's a role for that in the kind of games that you're talking about and making?
So
Tricky
I mean
question.
that's a great question, and definitely there could be. I mean, I personally don't think I'll be using AI like that in my games. I prefer like, working with actual people who are, for instance, part of the deaf community. So for past projects I've worked with, I hire native signers. Um, for one, you just know it's going to be much more accurate than a computer. Even actually just within the last month, I've been seeing a lot of posts on LinkedIn about some sign language AI companies that are, translating text and stuff into like British Sign Language. And they launched a basic version that people can try, and almost every sentence was wrong, or quite a lot of
Huh.
sentences were wrong, and people in the deaf community were saying this isn't accurate.
Mm.
And so you kind of have that issue of that if you try and lose sign language, or AI for sign languages or like any language, there are going to be some nuances that it doesn't necessarily pick up. Things are going to maybe be translated slightly awkwardly. And then that means that a learner could then pick up these mistakes that the AI is putting in. Whereas if you have like actual people involved who are either like play testing it or helping with the translation, you're more likely to get it accurate. I mean, AI can work if as long as you actually also still have the human element in it and that you do have people to go in and check it just to make sure that it is accurate. Um, because if a language learning project does have a lot of errors in it or just kind of awkward expressions, yeah, it's not going to really be benefiting language learners. And then it takes a while to unpick mistakes that you kind of internalize and learn in a language. So it's just better to have things that are correct from the beginning. But there definitely in the future could be a potential, and it could I feel maybe more in like the early stages. So maybe when you're prototyping something, using
Mm.
AI then could be all right. You can then just see how the layout is. Maybe does the sign language work better at the bottom of the screen or the top of the screen? Where do people prefer to look at it? How do people
Mm.
prefer the languages to be displayed? And then once you know how you want it to look, then you can hire in actual people to kind of just make it correct. So AI can definitely be useful for like reducing costs and like play testing early and kind of building the demos and prototypes. But I think at least for now, real people are just so much better. Maybe in 50 years time, it may be AI, maybe just as good. But at the moment, we're not quite at that level yet, I would say.
Mm. Makes sense.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries.
Anybody else? I see we got Melinda. Was it Jermaine and Petra? Jermaine is here.
Thank you. I just got my question answered.
Oh,
Thank
okay,
you.
cool. Okay. We can't hear you, Jermaine.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. Hey. Yeah, great interview. I'm just trying to visualize, how does the sign language work? Like with the game, is there like a static picture like at the corner at the bottom of the screen for like during the game, or is it something that's animated, or how
Hmm.
does it actually work?
That's a good
That is a great
question.
question. And actually, in my games, I use a variety of different approaches. So actually, in like this game behind me, I use sign language fonts for the alphabet. So there's finger spelling in sign language. So I have that as an optional one for people just wanting to see how finger spelled. I also use rotoscoping, which is where I'll trace over a video that I have that's in sign language to then make it be the character. So you can't really see him, but this character up here does do sign language in the game, but it's not very noticeable at the moment. I'm cut off at the top of the screen. But that could also instead be just images. It could be a couple of still images that maybe like almost like a GIF that flip between the different movements. There's quite a lot of for instance, online dictionaries, or even if you're just buying a sign language book, it would be done in images that way, or flashcards as well. So that kind of
Hmm.
method could definitely be useful, and it would reduce costs. For instance, you only maybe might need one or two images to convey what a word is. So that's definitely one way to do it. And then the other way is that I'll actually have videos of people actually signing.
Hmm.
And this could either then be converted into frame by frame images. And you could then, if your web software you're using doesn't like videos for whatever reason, you can put it in that way. Or you can just put it in as it is as a video. So there is like a variety of different ways to do it, and it can just depend on like how much what your budget is, how much time you have. But yeah, there's so many different ways to play around with it and include it. I think like the main issue with sign languages, if especially if you're adding it in late to a game, you have the issue of it potentially hiding other UI elements.
Hmm.
So finding a way if you're adding it to a game much later on in production is even maybe giving players the option to be able to drag it and move it to where they want it to be, so that then you don't have to worry about where it is. The player can figure out where they want it to go. Or just you might have to rearrange some of the UI elements when the sign language is on screen. Because there have been some other past games that people have made that do have sign language. That has been one of the criticisms, is that the sign language videos actually cover some of the UI elements, and then you kind of lose some of the important information you need to play the game. So I think that's one of the main kind of issues for adding a sign language. But yeah, there's so many different ways that you can include it. Like my advice would just be to kind of experiment with it. If you're interested, take part in the Signful Games Jam. It's going on until September of this year. And you don't have to spend the whole time making it, even just like a weekend, experimenting, see how it feels, and then uploading something. You can get some feedback from some people and see how it all works out.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for the question.
Martin, you want to ask this last one?
Yeah, sure. I noticed I did play one or two of the games that you have posted on your Discord. And I think most of them were available, through computers. So my question was, in the future, would you like to get your games onto other platforms like smartphones or tablets, or I don't know, Switch or something like that, to get a potentially wider audience? But I know in those formats, then Apple and Nintendo, whenever they get their fingers on it, and they get a lot more control over it. So, or are you happy to stay in the format you have now, where you have more say over your own content?
I mean, I definitely would be interested in expanding into other things. So actually, yeah, there's this game behind me. I am planning on launching it first on mobiles, just because I'm planning on kind of updating it regularly, and I feel like mobiles it kind of sits well with that kind of genre of just kind of adding in maybe a monthly update that might throw in more languages, might throw in some more words and vocabs, but then also have it on PC as well. But yeah, I would love to have a game on Switch or something in the future. That would be amazing. And I guess it depends on the game. I think, you know, a lot of games can be tweaked with the features. And at the moment, though, yeah, I quite like just being able to make my games as I want them to be. But I'm quite flexible there. In the future, if I did have the opportunity to release my games on more platforms, I think that would be, you know, a great way just to kind of spread kind of sign languages in games, and also just language learning games into more audiences and make it easier for people to pick up.
All right. That's a wrap. We're going to wrap this up here. I'd like to thank Willow for her time today to chat with us all about her experiences with teaching foreign languages, learning foreign languages, diving into the world of sign languages, looking at the problem or the issue with AAA games and the games that exist now, not including sign language in them. And yeah, just promoting awareness of this particular topic and having people create games in the second language, just doing lots of awesome things. Also won an award when she was 16 years old. So obviously, yeah, a lot of bright things coming for Willow in the future. So yeah, just one more time, thank you so much for your time today. And that's a wrap. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And thank you all for the really great questions too.